Hey, bro, how are you, Joey?
Hey, it's Brian from
Bro,
Brutal Planet. How you doing?
good, man. When's the last
Good.
time I talked to you?
Yes, sir. This is our first time, first chat.
Fun, huh?
Yeah, but the thing is you got a hockey fan here. I
Oh
was,
shit, a Devil's hat. I'm usually drinking out of a Devil's cup that they gave you when you got beer a couple of years back.
yeah, because I saw an interview or two last week. You're a Devil's hat. It's like okay. So I wanted to show you something. See if you remember this ad campaign.
Yes, was that game on? Was that 2012?
No, this was going back to like 95, 94.
No, I don't remember that. Then I
Yeah,
was
it was the
thinking
coolest game on earth.
that is fucking great, man. What's your team?
Well, I'm in Dallas, so I like the Stars. But the thing is when I was introduced to hockey back in '92, that was before the Stars came to town, and I was watching the Stanley Cup finals on a pay-per-view at a buddy's house. And so that's how I was introduced to hockey. So I just started following the Penguins. I know that's probably a rival of New Jersey, but hey.
Yeah, you know something. I mean, the Pens are coming right now, and I think that they could give more trouble to the Rangers than anybody else at this particular time. But I guess you got when did Dallas come? Because they were the North Stars before, right?
Right. Dallas was 93, 94. Because I was involved in the minor league hockey system down here. It was an independent league. So 93, 94 is when the North Stars, or when Dallas came down.
We got one of our best Devils ever from the Stars. That was Jamie Langenbrunner. I think it was Langenbrunner for Jason Arnott.
That I don't remember, but I just remember Langenbrunner was a young kid at the time.
Yeah, he
You
became
know?
our captain. Man. He
Yeah.
won 2 cups with the Devils.
Yes. I remember that in 95. So, being with the Devils, you guys got to have Mike Emmerich as your play-by-play guy.
Yeah, he's awesome. Doc.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I did a Stars intern in the 90s in the PR department. And when the Devils came to town that night, they needed me to run the stats for Emmerich. So I sat next to him in the broadcast booth. That was a treat.
Wouldn't it have been so cool? Like, you know how in the modern day you could take your phone, you could transfer the information to your computer. Wouldn't it have been cool to have gotten all Mike Emmerich's information up in your head? Because I mean, he's like a hockey encyclopedia who knows
Yeah.
how to word everything correctly. One of the best play-by-plays ever.
Yes. And I had a brief interaction with Gretzky. I've had dinner with Popman. I remember talking with Bobby Smith in the press box one night. And
Wow.
the only thing I could remember was thinking as I'm talking to Bobby Smith, it's like, you got 2 front teeth missing, but you got your bridge up there. So anyways, thank you so much for coming on and joining me. I appreciate it. Brutal Planet appreciates it. So for those who don't know yet, today I am speaking with Bobby Blitz of Overkill. I call you guys the Green Mean Thrash Machine. So before we get into talking about the album, I want to throw a number out. 1512 1512. Does that have any significance to you? Do you think it might relate to anything?
1512. Well, it's obviously not a date.
No. No, it's not.
No, it doesn't. I'm sorry. You're gonna have to.
Okay. Number of days between Wings of War and Scorched, because this was the longest time went between releases. So I went to Google and just typed in how many days between these two dates: February 22nd, 2019, April 14th, 2023.
I'm writing it down. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Well, I
gotta tell you a quick funny story.
Yes.
We were in North Carolina when Peter Pandemic made his appearance. You know what I mean?
Okay.
everything got shut down. We were at a place called the Fillmore in Charlotte, playing with Exporter out of New Orleans, and we deadheaded at home up to Jersey, and we missed the Jersey show, which was at a place called the Wellmont Theater. So we had all these T-shirts made, and we sent them back to the T-shirt company because we postponed the show till November 14th of 2021. It was our first show after the shutdown, and we had added to the back of it postponed 609 days. So somewhere in there, we're thinking along the same lines.
Yeah. So, because you're touching on something, I had, because Overkill was in Dallas on the 7th of March. I was there. We covered the show. Then you went to Tampa, you went to Orlando, went to Atlanta and Charlotte. And then I looked up Overkill touring history as I was researching for the interview, and I saw Silver Springs and Montclair. And I was wanting to know if, and you've already answered it, you missed some dates. So
we were at the Gas Monkey. That's a cool place down there in Dallas, that outside show. And I remember kind of fucking cold that night. I mean, I was like, I remember seeing people in like coats, or at least all the girls were in coats and gloves and scarves and everything. But it was full and it just felt right.
Yeah, it gets chilly here sometimes during, because we're still, early March, because it was March 7th. So it's just a little over, 3 years ago then. And it's kind of hard to believe everything that has happened, in the world. So Scorched, it's an amazing album. I was able to get a copy from Nuclear Blast, and I've listened to it, and I've done some research on it. I think it's fantastic. I really do. Oh, you're very welcome. I like all the heavy metal elements in there. You've mentioned this information in the bio: mature, refined, embellished. There's a lot of dynamics. There's some evolution. I love it all. What I want to do is, before we really dive back into it, I want to lead up to it, and that's what we're kind of talking about. So, was the 2020 shutdown when everybody was forced to go home, was that a blessing in disguise to kind of like start on Scorched?
Well, you can't really say that because the demo had been completed at that point.
Okay.
When I left Charlotte, North Carolina, and headed north to Jersey, I had that demo in my possession. I mean, it was on my computer.
Okay.
But it was a skeletal version.
Mm-hmm.
It was mock titles. There was no lyrics. There was no melody lines to it. No leads. No counter leads. There was changes to happen. I mean, a bunch of it stayed the same. I mean, but you can't hand Jason Bittner, who's a super talented drummer. I mean, the guy's a songwriter in his own right. You can't hand him and say, play this. You have to say, how do you see this? So I think when Dee Dee and he worked on that, and they kept me involved, and obviously Dave, because Dave has a lot to do with, what direction the song's going in. I mean, he's kind of our heavy meter. You know what I'm saying? If it's not heavy enough, Dave knows. So I think that it was a good feeling to I think for all of us to have a place to go. For Jason to do his drums, to interpret that demo, for Dave to interpret the melodies I was giving him. And now we had the luxury of time. So I do think that because of your 1512, that we're in a situation that we have that luxury of time, and the results kind of speak for themselves in thrash. And I think what we ended up doing was, once I saw where Dee Dee was going with the record, and I knew that it had those heavy metal elements in it. It also had some blues and some rock and roll, and there was some progressive thrash. I was like, how in the fuck are you going to make a quilt out of this? It's like every color is different on the record, And but I thought to myself, what a cool thing to have, especially when you have the luxury of time, to be able to sew that together kind of seamlessly with vocals and melody lines and Dave's riffs and Dave's leads. So I think the result of the record was based primarily on the fact that there was 1,512 days between two records.
Well, as I mentioned, I think it's a great record. There's heaviness in there. You mentioned wisdom. violence, the melodic energy. I love a lot of the melody, the melodic energy. I love the solid heavy metal stuff. And you mentioned wisdom. Did that come in, writing some of the lyrics? And where did the wisdom come from? Was it like life experiences, or just what was all going on?
It's a great take on it, or a great question, because I never thought of it until the afterwards. I mean, you don't sit there and realize you're being wise or being calculated or not calculated until after the fact. You only see that shit in hindsight. I could see the wisdom or the maturity in the record, or the fact that we became more experienced songwriters between two records, or over the course of 20 records. Feel the Fire's got, it's a first record. It's got a great amount of youthful angst to it. And there's something really special about your first girlfriend. In your head, you're thinking, wow, and it gets bigger and bigger, and she's better and better and better. But we became better songwriters over a 20 record span. And I think that that's what shines through on this. And it's not when you're doing it that you think that. It's that when you listen back to it, because you never hear it as a record when you're making a record. You hear it as individual songs, and all you're trying to do is piece them together. But when you hear it as a record and it's now sequenced, you can see all of the subconscious, or the wisdom or the experience that you've gained over the years. It shines through on the record in many different spots. And so that's where I saw it, was after the record was done and mixed, obviously, too.
Yeah. Well, there's just so many different elements that are just so appealing, to me, because I think you got about 4 years on me. So I like some of these older heavy metal elements in there. It makes it the more diversity, more variety. And so that leads me to, the first single, Scorched. When I heard that, I was like, not the first single, the lead track, Scorched. It reminds me of something that I just got a little hint of Maiden in there at the beginning with the guitars. And as I was listening to it, I was picturing you running out onto the stage right before to hit the mic. And it was just like, wow, this is a great song to lead the album.
I got to tell you something. I never knew this until afterwards. This is what we talked about in the last answer I gave. So when I looked at that whole thing when it was sequenced, and when I got that track from Dee Dee, it was mock titled as Opener. So I knew that that's what his vision of the song was. It was like, I see this as opening the record. And I was like, okay, let me try to put the roof on that house. That kind of by finishing my part of it. But when it was done and it was mixed, and it went into that guitar piece that opens the entire record, I said, this is Days Gone By. This is from another era. And then the modern punch of the drums come in, and then the song picks up at the double bass. I'm like, wait a second, this is like being in two eras simultaneously, which I thought was a really unique way to say what's coming is going to be multiple things simultaneously, not just thrash 2023, not just heavy metal 2023. It's about going back to something where they would start a song about wasted years, or fucking, Judas Priest's Sad Wings of Destiny. Not the Ripper.
Victims of Changes?
There you go. There you go. And it was what was done somewhere else in time. And I think that once you hear the mix, that when everybody comes in, it's also reminiscent. It's got a modern punch to it. It says 2023, but it also says, I got that scoop guitar in there all the way back in the 90s. So it becomes kind of a two places thing while listening to it in the current day.
And then you put the first single out, The Surgeon. That's just a killer track. It just that's pure overkill to me right there, The Surgeon. I just love the way it sounds. Then I was thinking I was going to ask you, is there going to be a second single? And then Wicked Place. Is it Wicked Place?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wicked Place.
Just released. And what I like about that is leading into the song. I got so much going on up here. It's just like, wow, you know, you're leaving me speechless on some of these tunes. So I just think is I got the bluesy feels, got the traditional heavy metal. But what I like, there's a tempo change, and I can just see people, marching in the pit and stuff like that. I love the ending, but it's still simple. And then that's I can just see a sea of heads just going with the tempo, some tempos in the song.
Well, you know something. I mean, you picked up something pretty good, and especially because you mentioned both singles. And now the Surgeon, we thought it was necessary after 1512 to be able to show, hey, we're back, and sure, shit's changed, but this is still a dependable place to go if you want to hear that stuff. If you can't sweat to the Surgeon, you're probably dead. If you're a thrash fan, you know what I mean? I'm like, oh no, I don't like this song. You should take your pulse. you should, and I'm not saying because it's great, but it is thrash 101,
Right.
and it's and listen, you might not like my voice, you might not like the song, I get it, but that beat and that guitar thing is I mean, that is right on point. But then you go to the contrast or the dynamic to something like Wicked Place. And I told this to a guy in an interview just recently. I said, man, I used to sing to riffs like this in the shower when I was a fucking paper boy. And I was part of the Columbia Record House back in the fucking 70s. This is like Foghat on fucking steroids. And so to me, this is where I come from. So I got the thrash where I come from. I've been part of that thrash scene since just about it began or just right after. And all that shit that made me want to be a musician or the shit I saw that was cool in it. So it's like this big, thick, heavy blues ride. And I'm thinking to myself, man, I love this shit. So again, we're speaking to dynamics and we're speaking to a diverse offering with regard to this record. It goes a whole bunch of different places. If somebody ever tells you, and I saw a guy told me, yeah, I listen to you, but all your stuff is the same. I'm like, you're not listening to us. That's a fucking lie. I don't care if our shit's not all the same.
Yeah, definitely not on this record. And another thing that I like is the thick sound of Dee Dee's bass.
It's back.
It just supports it. So as I was listening to, the Advance, I listened to it 3 or 4 times. I mentioned I started making notes. Then I started going, man, they got some great songs there, along with, Wicked Place and The Surgeon and then Scorched. Twist of the Wick. Oh my gosh. Like the funeral bell tolling or whatever type of bell it is. And then that choir in there. I wrote it down as like monks chanting or choir.
That's what we called it. That's what we called it on when the mix was going down. It was called monks on the board.
And then the tempo change. There's a lot of great material on there. I think people are going to be surprised.
There's a lot of different dynamics. There's a lot of comparatives. There's a lot of contrast. When you look at you go from so it's like the Surgeon into Twist of the Wick into Wicked Place, and there are 3 different kind of rides. You know what I mean? And you get to Twist of the Wick, and it's to some degree a progressive thrash song. It's got a little of that in there. You can almost hear those death metal blast beats from Jason in there. But they're done with a different nuance. And I had thought to myself, this was the hardest song for me to write. And I said, I don't know why, because I'm really cut for this stuff. I mean, this is the cut of my jib is in this tune, especially in those verses. And I was having the fucking hardest time. And I think it's because of the way it goes different places. And I finally got it, and I was working on it in a section. I was like, let's get this first section up. I'm going to get that verse, that pre-chorus, that chorus. So we're going progressive thrash into less progressive thrash into a heavy metal chorus. That's what we're doing. We're trying to sew all that together and make it one entity. So I was like, okay. I was working with my buddy Johnny. I'm like, Johnny, that's it. And he's like, all right, Mel, want to hear the whole thing? I'm like, yeah, play the whole thing. So he plays the whole thing. I'm sitting there with him, right? And I get to the fucking monk part, and I'm like, what the fuck is that? He goes, oh, Dee Dee sent this over. I dropped it in. Like when? Just like a month ago. A month.
Because I didn't hear it the first time. And
Yeah.
then the second time, like, I went, oh my.
Yeah, it's kind of a great nuance to it. There's a lot of ear candy on this. There's the monks, there's the church bells, there's the cello in the end of Wicked Place, playing the riff.
Yes.
Yes, there's a lot of that little stuff. There's a church bell even in the beginning of Scorched. So it's that ear candy that you can hear that comes through that always makes a record, in my opinion, worth listening to even down the road when you start picking up those things you didn't pick up when you had it on 10 coming out of your old Jensen speakers in the car.
Yeah, I think that's what I think I had earbuds in. It's like, wait a second. I went, oh, this is nice. So, I'm working my way through the album, and then Fever comes on. You have an amazing, clean voice. I was like, wow, this is really good. I like this. So that track Fever in your vocals. And then, it's got the bluesy sound. Then you kick it in. It's like, there's just so many dynamics. And I don't know what to say. It's just really nice.
Well, it was a tough song for me to write. I was like, he sent it through, or I got it in North Carolina and I heard it. We obviously discuss things on the phone or go back and forth with the technology of the day. I can send him over something. I mean, I must have done that mellow section 10 times, I was trying to be Mr. Scary. He's a little bit more Mr. Scary than me. He had the Bronx Casket Company. It was one of his bands that, he played kind of a gothic vibe and a bunch of that stuff. So he has that in him, but I have it less in me. And I was trying to like please that section of the song. And it was just a wrong approach. And I must have done it 10 times, like I said, And it was my place to go in the pandemic. It was like this little sliver of sunlight or sanity in all the insanity and darkness, So I'm out in the kitchen and I'm fucking singing, I mean, I just do that. I lived by myself at the time and I'm singing away and I'm cooking something on the stove and streaming Ozzy and I'm singing Over the Mountain. I'm having the time of my fucking life. Got a fucking open Heineken, sweating on the counter. I said, that's it. I said, the fucking guy just opens his mouth and he makes shit happen. It's like, it's Ozzy. As soon as he opens his mouth, his presentation's fucking beautiful. It's unto himself. And he can go all these different places. I don't need to be Mr. Scary. I just need to go in there and open my fucking mouth. And that's where the clean voice came from. It's the same voice. All I did was instead of going whisper, 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 I just moved it to the center in the roof of my mouth, moved it back in my mouth, and just opened. And out it came in one take. And I was really happy with the outcome because it was something that could have, in my opinion, the danger was it could have been ruined by overthinking, as opposed to just simplifying it by hearing something like Over the Mountain and how beautiful that is just in its purest form of the singer just singing it, not overthinking.
Right. So I want to move on just a little more. Colin Richardson, he was your producer, and 3 albums with you with Overkill in the past, 97, 2000, and 2003.
Right.
Some of these dynamics or these little nuances or whatever, these little ear candy things, did he have a lot to do with that, or were these things dropped in on the demos and then he just fine-tuned them? Or
no, this was, most of that ear candy stuff was ours.
Okay.
Because, and that's the luxury of time. That developed on and on. I was listening to shit, man. I mean, it's a pandemic. You did what you did. I did what I did. I'd be out on my deck, grilling a steak, and the dog would be like waiting for the fat, drinking a beer and listening to the demo. Got my shirt off. Summertime in Jersey, just fucking gorgeous. And I'm listening to Black Sabbath's Born Again with Ian Gillan, and I'm like, God, it's a great record. I think, God damn,
I like it.
Like this fucking guy. That fucking voice is fucking incredible. And sure enough, I hear the church bell. I forget what fucking tune it's in, and I'm like, that's got to be on this record. It's got to be on Scorched somewhere. And I threw it at Dee Dee. He's like, you're 100% right. We have so many little spots we can add all this shit. So as the vocals were being completed, a lot of that ear candy was being added to the record, whether it be the cello, whether it be the church bells, whether it be the monks. There was a whole bunch of shit going on there.
Well, the funny thing you mentioned, you were listening to Born Again. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to listen to it, and I'm going to try to find where it hit you, what song that the bell was in.
What song is it?
I don't know. But probably in the next couple of days, I'm going to go back and then.
No, it's not trashed. Zero to Hero, maybe.
You know what? I think it might be Zero to Hero because I could see, the tempo being more heavy, slower. I could see that happening in there.
It's Zero to Hero. I think it's in the opening sections of Zero to Hero. Okay. What a great song! What a great record, and not a forgotten record for metalheads and thrash guys. I mean, that record was Gillan is like he still can be the benchmark for so many vocalists because of his natural abilities, what he can accomplish with that voice over how many decades.
Right. I was a senior in high school when that record came out, so I was weeks away from graduating or whatever. So here in a couple weeks, you're heading to Europe. Got some dates, April 13th through April 30th. And we know that the record's going to come out while you're out there in Europe. Any plans? I'm sure everybody's asking you this. Any plans for the U.S.? I know there are. I don't know if you can divulge anything. Fall, winter next year. I would think it'd be too late for summer to announce it. I don't know. So have you guys even discussed, have you Overkill discussed any North American dates, U.S. dates?
Well, we haven't announced, but we're poking around enough holds through the U.S. in June and July.
Okay.
Now, for me, that's like, man, that is just heaven. I haven't had a good U.S. summertime tour in forever. You know what I mean? I love those tours. I think the first thing we did the last time we had one of those was we all put our money together and we went out and bought, propane barbecue. We'd finish sound check. We'd send somebody out. Go, all right, we need 10 ribeyes, 10 corn on the cob, 10 baked potatoes, and that's it's kind of a great barbecue metal vibe for us. And we do this. We tour because it's fun.
Right.
So we're poking around right now, and we have holds. So we're going to see what happens. We're talking to some support right now. We'd like to do it then. It's got to be correct. It's a different time for touring with regard to logistics and the parameters of it. The fucking world is upside down with cost. And, I always think that we've been a fair band when it comes to all of, what we've done over the years with regard to prices. And I never feel like we've ever ripped anybody off. No. But it's just kind of this weird, it's this weird time. So you got to be real careful with the balance between the two. So I'm hoping to be out in the summer, or we are hoping to be out in the early summer. And then some festivals over in Europe during the late summer.
Right. And I'm glad you mentioned finances because I was going to try to, wrap things up. So I don't want to keep you too much. There's a topic that little by little starting to gain some traction. And I think fans are becoming aware of it. It's venues taking a cut of the merch.
That's always happened. I've done this for a long time.
Yeah.
I don't know. When somebody says to me, oh, I can't believe the venue's taking a cut of the merch, I'm like, they did that in the 80s.
So they've been doing it all along. See,
they've been doing it all along. And it's. I think that what you see sometimes is when it becomes a conglomerate that's running the tour. Like if you're doing a Live Nation tour, it's a little bit different than when you're doing from an independent promoter. An independent promoter has, I think, an understanding more so, or many of them have an understanding with regard to, hey, we can only put 800 or 1,000 people into the fucking room. This band can't be making a fucking fortune. I'm going to take their merch for having them sell it on my property, but I'm only going to take 10%. But then you get to a bigger conglomerate, they have a business plan, where that percentage could be, for instance, double that, or in many cases is. So it's not something that we have ever been surprised by. It's something that's always been there for us. And that's when I think a lot of people don't quite understand, because they're not in the business, when the price of the shirt is pumped up, you go, oh, geez, I can get this online for $10 less. The point is the percentage, the shipping. You know what I'm saying? You got to run a business. You need a markup to run a business, or a keystone markup to to be able to make it happen. To be able to make it happen profitably. I mean, I got to pay these fucking guys.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And I think that, like, if you talk to the dudes in the band, they'll always say, hey, they always got to us first. Made sure that regardless what happened, that they sealed the deal that they said they were going to do. So
okay. Anything you want to share? We've touched on quite a bit.
It's good to be back. We toured it almost exactly a year ago. We were out in the States. We did like an end of pandemic kind of a run. And, some of the venues we were in were exactly the ones we were in when it was shut down on exactly the same day, which was like weird. Like we were supposed to be in the Fillmore in Silver Springs, Maryland, on the 13th of March, 2020. We were there in 2022, exactly the same day. So it was just, it was kind of fun to be able to get out there and just kind of stretch our legs. But it's way more fun when you got a new record, that you're holding in your hand. So I'm really looking forward to doing this. I mean, I'm feeling spry. I'm feeling like, the time is right. I'm feeling like, I don't just need it, other people need it. So, I'm going to be selfish and do it for selfish needs. And usually everyone benefits when I'm selfish.
Okay. Well, awesome. Listen, I appreciate your time. I'm going to stop the recording here, but I want to ask you a hockey thing without it recording. Is that okay?
Sure. Right. I got another one in a couple of minutes, though.
Okay.